So in the we have various parts. Yeah, one of it is I'll be providing an example of where I work with IUCN of the Great Wall Initiative, and I remember my colleague yesterday spoke about it. Sorry for those who are missing, but basically it was the Western Indian Ocean Initiative, which looks into generative system, working with local communities to empower them in blue economy. You want that? Really good. At the airport, I'm inspired. Yeah. So basically, so since she mentioned, way better about the technical aspect and the scope of Great Wall, I'll be trying to put the nexus of science and communications of the Great Wall and what I've been working on. And that week, I'll start with the Great Wall brand. Why am I presenting it as an example? Just for you guys to understand, because hopefully I'll be speaking your language, right? When speaking of branding, is it not? Yeah. Is it not your language? Branding, communication. So why is it important? Before I start, because I believe it's journalists shape how the public and policymakers perceive ocean conservation. So branding also looks into perception on how people will actually perceive what we are trying to deliver to them, correct? The narratives of conservation. But second of all is bridging science policy and public awareness. Also having you colleagues, the media champions and the communicators as the champions of ocean conservation. Let's start.
Need to mute that.
Yeah, as I was introduced, working with IUCN, coordinating the regional communications in Eastern and Southern Africa part, specifically countries across the Great Wall Initiative. Yeah, I know I'm a scientist, but today I'll be switching to the communications part, right? So I'm just putting this as an example because for us to be able to understand the perception, in Swahili tunasema dhana. So dhana ya jamii katika masuala ya uhifadhi wa mazingira iko vipi? We are creating perceptions to the people, specifically from the journalists, to the people on how they should understand and perceive environmental conservation in any aspect, either it being terrestrial or ocean, to see how they can receive it. But it's basically us preparing it for them, right? Before even it's getting delivered to them. So it's just an example. Specifically, our aim was to, why did we have the Great Wall? In Swahili, we can say, ukuta blue, ukuta tu ambao unatembea kwenye, au unaambaa kwenye bahari ya Hindi, upande wa magharibi ya bahari ya Hindi, ikiwemo nchi za Tanzania, Somalia, Kenya, Mozambique, Seychelles, Comoros, Madagascar. So basically, the Great Wall, you can just think of it as a wall, but not specifically a brick which blocks everything, but specifically a wall which looks into working with communities in Madagascar, in Comoros, in Seychelles, in Mozambique, in Tanzania, in Kenya. For now, that's where the area is, and to be inspirational in terms of it being a leader in unlocking ocean conservation by supporting them through regenerative economic approaches, governance, meaning inclusive governance approaches for ocean awareness and conservation, and thirdly, nature-based solutions, masuluhisho ya asili kwa ajili ya jamii zetu katika fukwe ama rasilimali za bahari. So specifically, this is a narrative that we want to create. So specifically, I was given the task to create the brand, but to see how will people perceive it and what are we trying to achieve moving forward. And this is where the communicators and the journalists actually come in. So for us, it was to see if the Western Indian Ocean and the Great Global Initiative would be a catalyst and an accelerator to unlock, the global South movement towards an abundant blue future. And of course, being a transformative force for global ocean action, and to see other parts of the world having this as an inspiration for them to be able to achieve the goals of ocean conservation, ocean governance, and regenerative blue economy. Characteristics. So we also had the task to define what's our character and in zipi characteristics. Tabia? Swahili tabia? Sifa zetu, we need to define where do we stand and what we want people to know us for, right? Number one is for us to be thinking of just people and nature, not just to think of nature. Wakati tunafikiria maliasili au rasilimali za bahari, basi pia tuwafikirie na watu wake. It's basically connecting people and nature. And this is where the journalists and the communicators are coming in. I said in the very beginning, what's the perception? The moment you say it's just a wall which looks into conserving and protecting the oceans, not mentioning people, then that's a problem, right? So specifically, unasema kwamba ni ukuta tu ambao umekuja kwa ajili ya kuhifadhi rasilimali za bahari na hakuna hata mmoja anayeruhusiwa kuvuna wala kunufaika kutokana na rasilimali hizo. Hiyo ni tatizo. So people and nature, watu na rasilimali za bahari ambazo zipo katika fukwe na ndani ya bahari. Thinking of ecosystem richness, yesterday Mahfoud presented about ecosystem biodiversity, right? Yeah, richness and abundance. Those are two different terms. I hope we also touch on it. So basically, it's just the diversity. We have 10 lions, right? Okay, let's think of our ocean species for now. We have 10 whale sharks in Mafia. But are the 10 whale sharks in Mafia the only whale sharks that we have in Mafia? I don't know if you're getting my question. So abundance for them is like, okay, we have 10 whale sharks, but are they different? Right? So wingi wao sio utofauti wao. Kwenye ecosystem tuna simba 50 alafu tuna swala wawili. So inamaanisha simba wako wengi na swala wako wachache, lakini tunatamani kuona viumbe wengine pia wakiwepo kwenye ile ecosystem kuonesha uanwani. So it's basically the differences that is trying to be to be showcased happening in the ecosystem. We don't want to see an ecosystem which is basically dominant in one species, and we are looking into seeing if the ecosystem is rich in a particular species, what is the diversity, and how are we, of course, inspired by it, and how can we be able to conserve and provide diversity. And of course, the ecosystem can be restored, and the diversity can be restored and taken back. We stand to be conservation too. We believe that good stewardship and a love for biodiversity is core to who we are, what we do. Of course, to be iconically appealing, and to see how we can bring people together. And yeah, I don't know if you've seen this logo. So when the consultant was creating the logo, they claimed that the letter B is having, I don't know if you guys are seeing it, huh? Yes, what are you seeing?
Yeah, it's a tail of whale.
The tail of a whale. But does someone see a human being there?
Sirena.
Do you? Yes. This is a nose, huh? Yeah. So people and the ocean. So basically, it was more of seeing how can we be able to just even showcase it and have it iconically appealing. And as I mentioned, just to be the initiative to be an iconic leader on ocean health and people prosperity. What's our audience? Lazima tufikirie hadhira yetu ni nini. Our audience is the people who basically want to create and sustain a world where oceans and people thrive, beautiful, free, and abundant lives of respect, understanding, and harmony. But if you have noticed, it's basically targeting the people, as I said, right? But also looking into the people who have, not only the passion, but maybe have a hope to see, can we really achieve the goals of conservation, regardless if it's terrestrial or ocean. But of course, for this one, the aim was to be a champion on the ocean side. I don't know if you heard about the Great Green Wall. The Green Wall. You heard about it?
Yes.
Yeah. So you can say it's basically like, the couple of the Great Green Wall. So, but as I said, people who really want to see the future of conservation achievable. And who are people? We call them the Great Blue people, or the Great Blue Wallers. Or the other word is the Blue Guardians, the ones who are actually the custodians of the ocean and also ecosystems. They are considered to be ambitious, bold, driven, and committed. They are basically the practical pioneers, just like you guys here. Positive, caring, skill, and inspired to do good. And they are the reason we do, and we will succeed. And will succeed. So basically, who are the Great Blue people? Just as you can say, it's basically like they are the ones that are our audience, but basically it's the people that they want to see us achieve our goals, right? But they also want to see the goals being achieved, regardless, even if it's not the Great Blue Wall to achieve it, but at least on their local context, national context, they want to see a thriving, blue, abundant future. Just like those colleagues that are here, you wish to tell the stories that are actually, show hope about the future. And basically, you are the Great Blue Wall people, right? Great Blue Wall is circular economy. So, as I mentioned, it's not just about conservation. It's not a wall. CO2 also hifadhi, but also converting challenges into opportunities. I'm sure in circular economy, from yesterday to today, even before you guys were here, we were discussing and thinking on how best we can convert the challenges into opportunities. And we have space that can basically be useful for us to be able to discuss challenges, but convert them into opportunities. And this is an example of the ocean space. I just wanted to introduce this project to be specific. It's named as the Island Plus Project. This project, funded by the Coca-Cola Foundation, is tackling marine plastics through, we say, the cycle of creating value from the plastics, but also working with community and informal sectors, to be specific, and policy advocacy for long-term change. Have you heard of the policy called the EPR? Extended producer responsibility? Correct. So Island Plus really looks into this. And it works in 7 islands, and one of them is Zanzibar. And it has just started. And here with us, we have a National Plastics Officer for Zanzibar who wants to say something about the project, but also a bit of a commercial break for 2 minutes on what the plans are.
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
So, I'm well introduced. I am Genoveva Fexi, working for IUCN as the National Plastics Officer for Zanzibar. As my colleague just mentioned, we have started implementing the Island Plus project in Zanzibar. The project is a regional project. It's being implemented in the East and Southern Africa region and the West Africa region. So in Zanzibar, Comoros, Mauritius, Madagascar, Sao Tome and Principe, Cabo Verde, Madagascar, I haven't mentioned all of them, but yeah, the 7 islands. So based in Zanzibar, the project aims at improving lives of informal sectors, about 2,400 lives of informal sectors. Those are the objectives of the project. And also it plans on collecting and recycling about 2,190 tons of plastic. So generally creating a circular economy for them. And it also aims at coming up with innovative ways of combating plastic pollution in Zanzibar. So based on all the mentioned objectives, the project has an initiative that is coming up this June. We plan on implementing during the World Environment and World Oceans Day. We plan on implementing a marathon. The marathon is going to be a plastic waste-free marathon, which is going to be held here in Zanzibar. So it's just not going to be a normal marathon. We plan on making people run for a cause. We want people to run as they collect plastic. So they're going to be running and collecting plastic. And it's just not going to be a marathon only. So it'll be a marathon, and also we plan on doing exhibitions. We also plan on having live recycling activities happening at the same time. We also plan on having innovation and incubation hubs at the same time. So it's going to be more of a like a networking event, and also an event that creates solutions and way forward when it comes to plastic pollution in Zanzibar. So I'm bringing this forward to you to ask for your engagement. So it could be, you could look at it and probably want to get involved as a sponsor, or want to partner, or I see a lot of media here, you also just want to spread the word. So you're very welcome to want to reach out in any way that you want, so we can work together and create a waste-free Zanzibar. Plastic waste-free.
I don't know. All good? Yeah. I'll share the link after. No problem. Yeah, so to conclude, on my opinion or my perspective, I'm seeing journalists as ocean champions. Journalists, communicators as the ocean champions. And I believe stories do shape the narratives. And of course, the media do shape the narrative, and the story that the media writes shapes the narrative, right? The media writes or the media showcases shapes the narrative. And reporting, as I mentioned in the very beginning, reporting does influence policy and action. So here you say, media ni tasnia gani? Media ni tuseme uandishi au utangazaji tasnia ya habari. Tasnia ya habari inatengeneza dhana, inabadilisha kutengeneza dhana ambazo watu wanafikiria. Uwasilishaji wako wa kuripoti kazi unazozifanya katika jamii zetu ina uwezo mkubwa sana wa kuathiri ama kurakabisha sera, lakini pia na utendaji kwa maana ya action from your story. And number one, I just wanted to speak about reshaping the narrative. So, for example, we are speaking of the Africa circular economy industry. What's the narrative? Someone can say something about this. What's the narrative of just Africa circular economy industry? Ni hivi dhana ya uchumi wa kurejeleza Afrika. Because I just wanted to do something.
Okay, the perception is that Africa is not, first of all, is not well equipped to handle the circular economy. You know, that's yes, and also the population is not well. That's the perception. That's not the truth. The population is not well educated to understand the importance of circular economy. That's the perception.
Perfect. Asante sana. So number one, Africa is not equipped to actually, transition towards circular economy. So who said that? See, No, sorry. So, so someone published it somewhere and people have learned it, and that's the narrative now. That's the truth, right? So it's basically, now the thing is, reshaping the narrative is quite of a, and I'm sure it's a tough journey that maybe all of you guys have actually been working on. It's like someone has published it this way, maybe their media is so powerful, and you are like, how can I even confront it? How can I reshape it? And it's becoming tough for you because maybe you have less following, maybe you have less influence. And so I'm actually part of a program called the Africa Refocus program. So the Africa Refocus program, the refocusing looks into thinking of, as a cameraman. So now I'm not a scientist anymore. As a cameraman, focusing says a lot about the subjects, right? And in production, the same. So refocusing is that the lens was actually targeting, let's say, Jen over there. But now we are trying to say that maybe auto-focusing will only target Jen and not show the background, which will actually blur in the background. At the same time, maybe we could, how do we say it, a wide shot, right? We could take a wider shot of the frame and see that actually Jen was not in the room alone. Maybe the focus could have been seeing that it's actually a bigger room and a bigger audience and a bigger number of participants. So basically, the program looks into reshaping the narrative and seeing if we are able to redefine the narrative that was actually defined by those who were having influence and the technology, as she mentioned, and the tools. So, maybe, about the narratives that are happening with politics, with conservation. It's just insane, right? And you're like, who do I believe in? Do I believe in this international media, this local media? Do I believe in just the people? And so the refocus looks into reshaping the lens, looking into actually a wider perspective and the true perspective. And I'll finish up with a quote at the very end to see how they actually are trying to achieve it. But one of them is actually having people-centered stories. This is also my opinion in having the moment you actually evoke the emotions of your audience through people-centered stories. That's when people will be inspired to see if something is really happening. We have seen stories. Actually, I'm even inspired by the way. My own government has been creating some videos, and we found now the narrative is not, not only, let's say, the minister speaking in the office and saying about the program, but it takes a storyline from, let's say, clean cooking, right? A storyline from a woman in a village who really struggles, with firewoods and everything. And now the story starts from the woman who really struggled, with the clean cooking issues. So it struggles by using firewoods and charcoals, and the narrative in that community. Maybe they're also seen as, the people who actually do witchcraft. I don't know if you guys have heard about it. Yeah, when I'm doing Wachawi, since they have red eyes, so they are called witchcraft because they have red eyes. And you find that the woman faces just a lot. Like she has to take time to go to the firewood from the forest. It's about the insecurity. It's about, the distance. It's about her and her family, her other roles. The moment the story gets into that specific mom or mother or woman, then it goes into her saying about, but now we've got this new program. The program, brought us to this level. We are now into this cooking. And then we have the minister at the very end, or even not speaking in the whole video, which now it shows like, okay, how the program actually affects the community, and how are we, trying to not only say on behalf of the community, but the community speaking for themselves about what is really happening. So it's more of just an example of how people-centered stories are really, really important in what they're trying to deliver. I understand with plastic pollution and cycle economy, it's the same. Just think of an informal waste speaker and take through the, walk through the journey with the informal waste speaker. You'll find an amazing written story, an amazing video story, the podcast, whatever the form is, but specifically the moment it's people-centered, you have won the heart of the people. And as I say, types and forms are very important. And I just mentioned, you have the written ones. I'm sure you have experts here who are really good in writing, experts really good in production, experts really good in editing, experts really good in all the, the industrial part and all the compartments of the media industry. And science telling. So this was science telling is usually a very much hidden word, and I really like to use it. So it's basically telling science. So it has been tough, I know. First of all, for the conservation people or the experts to speak in a communicated language. And then it has been tough again for the journalists with the scientific language, or the technical language. So basically, how do we bring these two people together? And I believe that's why we're here. And what we're trying to achieve is also, equipping myself with more of, of stories and journalistic skills and scientists, at least understanding what really is happening in the media industry. And actually, this is where I position myself usually in the nexus between science, communications, and policy and books. And I believe this can be through the journalism and communications. And you can also have a look. I'm sure you have done it before. Eco-journalism, eco-communications, science communication, different forms. And I'm sure you'll be learning a lot. And you have already learned a lot about what is happening in this sector, especially when it comes to the topic of microplastics. We have narratives that, some people, the moment you publish, like, okay, microplastics are actually killing people. I don't know what's the narrative to come from the audience. But basically, you're just trying to shoot your shot, of showing how microplastics can actually go throughout the chain of the ecosystem from, now I'm a scientist, right? From, from the mercury that comes from the mines, then it goes to the fish in the river, then with bioaccumulation and biomagnification, goes up to the ecosystem. I eat the fish, it biomagnifies because I have the characteristics of biomagnifying. Then I get cancer, then it kills people. And now you see, so basically it's more of a, trying to merge these two people together to understand what's really happening. And what my suggestion would be maybe before publishing a piece, of course, it's a scientist, and I'm sure, you guys are also doing that. And I think this piece is, a good story, but maybe I'm just writing a science fiction. Maybe it's a very wrong narrative, so it's going out for the public. And my quote is: if you want to change the story itself. Thank you so much.
You want to take the story? Yeah, so Gamit, you can take your seat. We are going to have whoever has a question for him. We'll have the questions after the morning presentations. Aside from let's appreciate him again as he. So we are going to have questions all together after the morning session. So I will want now to introduce our friend from UNCTAD, who is Indika Vasili, who is seated just right next to me. And he is going to take us through the negotiations of the Global Treaty on Plastic Pollution, the regional process in East Africa, because they are heavily involved in East Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa, as he told us, and insights from the 5th UN Oceans Forum. So Enrique Pasini works for the United Nations Trade and Development in Geneva, specializing in trade and circular economy. He is a member of the leadership team for the SMEP program, established by the UNCTAD to prevent pollution in manufacturing sectors of Africa and Asia, including plastics. Pasini holds a degree in economics, in studies, and a PhD in energy technology. Completed his postdoctoral fellowship at the Harvard University studying global trade networks of plastic scrap material and co-chaired their first circular economy symposium. Pasini has published over 30 articles on environment, trade, and development, and has worked for various private and public institutions. Welcome, Mr. Pasini, and take it from there. So we are going to join questions for both Gamit and Mr. Pasini after his presentation. Perfect.
The presentation connect well with the data presented. National Geographic Fellows were one of my green gigs. I applied many times, never got it. You have to tell me how. So yes, I work for UN Trade and Development. It's a trade agency of the United Nations, based in Geneva, Switzerland. We have a small office in Ethiopia, a small office in New York, slightly bigger office in Fiji as well. So we also have a bit of a global presence. And I'm going to talk more about plastics because my goal here is to give you a bit of substantive depth about the issue of plastic pollution. In the end, I'm going to touch on the processes that you just mentioned in global negotiations for an international plastics treaty and the regional process that is happening here in East Africa to harmonize the laws of the 7 East African countries into a single, more simplified law that is the same across all the countries to combat plastic pollution, especially single-use plastic items. The global attempt to create a treaty against plastics is very ambitious and touches multiple areas across the entire life cycle of plastics. The initiative in East Africa is more focused on items that are more readily controllable, such as single-use items, bags, and cups, and cutlery items, straws. So there's a bit of difference in scope. Let's get back to the basics. And I'll try to do like my colleague. I'll never be able to do like he does, but as a professional teacher, high school teacher. But let's get back to the basics of plastics, right? And let's talk even before plastics. Every invention in the world that is fantastic, revolutionary, and transformative comes as a double-bladed sword, double-edged blade. It can make wonders for society, but it can also be dangerous in a way. Let me get you some examples. When people realize that if they use minerals that had some fiber structure on it to blend into cement and build a very cheap material that would allow us to build our houses, especially the roofs of our houses, at a very low cost, far cheaper than wood, asbestos was born. Right? Building houses with asbestos containing, asbestos is a mineral fiber. You can mine it, and then you can blend it into cement and make those roof coverings that we all know, right? These those things were widespread everywhere in the world, in the north, in the global south. But even though it's cheap, allows housing to be expanded to a lot of people, has relatively good thermal properties at this cost point. It causes cancer. It's bad for your lungs. It causes a health hazard. How did we find out? After many decades of using this, and actually fibers, mineral fibers are used for thousands of years. But the tiles containing asbestos, the banning of asbestos is a 20th century thing, late 20th century phenomenon. So this wonderful construction material, which came out as a huge health hazard, can get emphysema. Your lungs stop working, and you live less, except in addition to the cancer risks. So this proved to be a very complicated material. This mineral piece showing the impact of fiber. You have the presentation. So this is one example. The other example of a wonderful material or wonderful product that caused a revolution in agricultural use is this bad boy here. Actually, the good one. It was, I think many of us, not all of us, would not be here today if they didn't discover this in the early 20th century. Because these allowed the population bomb to be deactivated. So these allowed agricultural productivity to keep growing very, very fast in the 20th century because we could control pests very well, agricultural pests. You spray DDT in crops, you have no pests. The crops, tomatoes, they grow beautifully, large, nutritious, but with time, it was found out DDT is also similar to the Cyclone Z, the chemical that they used in the death camps. So DDT has huge health implications. And when you're exposed to it, either through food or through spraying or living in agricultural areas, Be reminded that most people live in agricultural areas today after the 20th century. It shortens your life as well. Gives you a number of problems and economic problems, existing problems that were only found out decades later after the use. So this revolution in agriculture and agricultural productivity that was enabled by this, and actually it enabled population to keep growing. And again, if we didn't have that invention, we would not be here today, or part of us would not be. That also came with a huge cost to human health later on. The third example is some guy putting gasoline in the car, right? Once the combustion engine substitute forces in the early 20th century, it was quickly realized that once you press a fuel inside a cylinder and it detonates, or the essence of the combustion engine, like this requires a type of detonation control. Meaning, if you just press gasoline in a cylinder, sometimes the gasoline will explode early, sometimes later. So the depth of the shaft will change. This will cause vibration and engine inefficiency. So you need an anti-detonation chemical or additive to improve the engine performance. So to make sure that the shaft will go all the way to compress the gasoline a lot until you get a very efficient detonation and more performance for your fuel. And with many tests ongoing and people checking what was possible, they realized that if they used a lead-based additive that comes from leaded gasoline, this detonation could be controlled and the gasoline performance and engine would be much better. So leaded gasoline transformed the technology, enabled the technology to grow and cars to become the main, or vehicles, combustion engines, to become the main driver of transportation throughout the 20th century until today. But lead, as you know, contains lead contamination. It's a heavy metal that is also toxic. It has neurotoxicity. It destroys your joints. Your body cannot secrete it, so it stays in your system or in your life. So more people died in terms of life years lost. More people lost life with leaded gasoline than in World War III. So this came also as a mixed blessing, a blessing and a curse. And so eventually lead was replaced by other antidetonants, probably especially ethanol. You can use also alcohol, do the same. At that time, early 20th century, people were drinking alcohol, not producing industrial scale alcohol, so there was not enough alcohol to do that function. So eventually, especially due to the health arguments, lead gasoline was phased out. And by the way, the last country to phase out the leaded gasoline was just now. I believe it was Algeria in 2021. Until then, you still had leaded gasoline. And the problem of that is that when you run the engine, if you have leaded gasoline, it spreads the lead in the atmosphere. So it spreads a thin layer of lead everywhere. In the pets, in our food, in the air, in the roads. So it increases our blood levels of lead. Plastics. Are plastics a modern, wonderful invention that will claim its price later on? See if I can open a brief screen here. It's a news article I did. For So this is a small article I did for a newspaper. So I was looking at the history of plastics. And plastics, interestingly, they came as the polymers, small molecules that produce the small monomers that produce the one. There's a whole science behind it. But I'll just get to the same argument of the savior or wonderful material that became a problematic one. By the way, plastics are not only synthetic. You have natural plastics. Horns of animals are a type of plastic. The shells of crustaceans are also a type of plastic. The turtle shells are also a type of plastics. So there are many natural, rubber is a type of plastic. So those natural plastics have been used for millennia on Earth, but mostly from plant and animal origins. So the ability to produce those at scale was great. For example, keratin, like the thing we have in our nails, and lobster also have, crabs. This has been used for a long time to do coatings. So you can use insect shells or crustacean shells to do coatings and also to mold it into materials like basic combs, for example. You can get elephant tusks and make a comb out of it, or make a knife handle. Those things were done for a millennium. But synthetic plastics, that's recent. In the half of the 19th century, a guy called Alexander Parks, he managed to synthesize the first industrial plastic made from cellulosic nitrates. And this is an interesting image because a lot of how to say that in English, the game where pool, they play pool, the pool balls, like the colorful balls, they used to be made of parkesin, which is the substance that he managed to create. The same substance, the first plastic, was also used for film, to make the negatives of film. So you can feel that one big problem of that, it was hugely flammable like gasoline. Even today, it's tricky to store old film because it burns so fast. But it was fantastic. They also used it to be able to record sounds, to make I'm all the older ones in the room, but we had all LPs at home, right? The black discs. Those discs were of parkesin in the early days. And then, of course, were substituted for PVC. So you see that around the mid of the 19th century, the industrial plastics started to be made. And then only in the 20th century itself, from the early 20th century, that the large-scale industrial plastics started to be made. Right? Dow Chemicals, ExxonMobil, DuPont, BASF, they became the pioneers at the plastics revolution. And this was a revolution. Just like asbestos for construction materials, it reduced the cost and increased the performance dramatically. The lightness and waterproofing of plastics was revolutionary. You cannot get that with a wax cotton, which was the waterproof material of the past. You cannot get that with leather. You cannot get that with any natural fiber. You could also coat the wires with plastic to protect the wires from rust and corrosion. Things that would really increase the technological possibilities of the world. And then, of course, nylon stockings were developed and became a fashion item. It slowly started to embed the way we dress. The way we dress, the way we look. If you look at the history of fashion in the 20th century, you see a fashion moving from natural fibers like wool and cotton to fashion moving to plastics like today. Polyester is the biggest fiber in the synthetic fiber. Plastics helped us to do war and conflicts better. Plastics became also substituted steel in body armor. The invention of Kevlar, this long chain of polymers, Dyneema and other materials that started to, okay, now we can stop a bullet with 1/5 of the weight of of the metals. And that changed a lot. So it was, and then in the mid-70s, you started having the bottles. And that, until then, glass and other solutions, and other materials were cheaper. But then we started having PET invented in the 70s, adoption increased in the 80s, and then in the 90s, 2000s, that really took off. Okay. And then the rest is history. We have, but that solution, getting back to the presentation here, it came as a blessing to the world, to the material system. It decreased the cost of everything else. And then now it's a curse. It's a pollution everywhere. We heard about microplastics in the presentation before, but one thing is missing, perhaps. But this thing might come. Unlike asbestos, DDT, or leaded gasoline, there has been not yet an eureka moment for plastics and human health. That's saying, oh, plastics shortens your life, or plastics depletes agriculture or kills biodiversity to a point where it would really blow back at us. Maybe this argument might be coming. They have been finding plastics in various organs of the human body. There was a paper recently that noticed 0.5% of plastics in the human brain, and this concentration is growing. Imagine if you, I don't know, you get 1.2%, 2% of plastics in the human brain, microplastics, and that starts to trigger early Alzheimer's. That might trigger rapid controls on plastics. There's also a paper yesterday, I think on Nature, that was looking at the microplastics decrease the efficiency of photosynthesis. Meaning, decrease the speed at which seaweed can grow, this decrease the efficiency of agriculture. That might also prompt action proven true, valid by other studies. So we might reach, we're still in the story of relatively the positive story of plastics. And the advantages are so big, the problems are visible, but they're not as big. But if a health argument is created, this story, this equation might change. We did some studies, and I can share with the link, looking at some of our capacity building projects, including one that you have a presentation, I believe tomorrow, the flip-floppy project in Lamu. Those projects in Ghana, they remove plastics from the river. Flip-floppy removes plastics from the environment in the Lamu archipelago, making furniture and boats out of it. So they, in a way, they deviate plastics from leaking into the environment into something more useful. For example, making boats, making furniture. And we calculated more or less for every 1,000 tons of plastics that those projects deviate in their context, how much human life they save. So in case of Kenya, 1,000 tons of plastics deviated because that's an area where there's no waste management capacity. Like Lamu has no recycling, has a poor waste collection. So it's very exposed to the risks of plastics and has no other system to collect it. So for every 10,000 tons of plastic collected, people in average tend to live more, that's like a sum of additional time for the community, more 24 years. Why can plastics damage your human health, and how does it get there? For example, plastic litter serves as a nesting bed for mosquitoes, malaria disease. Plastics production, plastics are basically carbon coming from the underground, right, from fossil fuels. It increases climate change. Climate change increases the temperature on Earth and shifts the burden of disease. So some disease will not exist, or some fungi or algae blooms that would be under control at a certain temperature can blossom at another temperature, then that can affect human health, can affect water quality. So there are many different pathways to which plastics can affect human health. I can give you more details during this publication. What are the main types of plastic? I'm happy to have one big expert here in the room, Jennifer, the other Jen, who worked many years with plastics recycling. Basically, the American Standards Organization, ASTM, created the resin identification codes. We have this everywhere. Probably take your phone or see under a PET bottle cap. You see those codes. 01 is PET, right? The bottles. HDPE is a harder plastic. PVC is the one that contains chlorine. It's great for construction PVC, highly water resistance, weather resistance, ultraviolet also resistance. But when you burn it, it's very toxic. LDPE, I think the most fumes, like when you, I think the breakfast this morning had a film on it, that's LDPE, low density polyethylene film. Polypropylene, I believe that many caps are now of the containers. I think also the cap of the people, it's not this PT is the body, the cap is I think it's polypropylene. And then you have a polystyrene, like styrofoam, like those plastics that help you to insulate, to do thermal insulation in buildings, in containers for foods, also a complicated one to recycle. And then you have all others, like the one I mentioned before for military and security applications, the Kevlar, that's a special application of plastics. And there are many blends, things that are combined together to increase performance. But those are the main polymers, the main types of plastics in the world, and also the main types of plastics that are recycled. The main types of plastics that are recycled, especially PET, HDPE, LDPE, and PP. PVC and polystyrene, not so much recycled. But Jennifer could complement. Plastics trade. Plastic trade is enormous. It's much larger than the trade of many countries, combined trade of many countries. And in 2022, the latest information we have is the plastics trade, not production. Production is higher. I'm talking of things that cross the border in the world. $1.2 trillion. But this contains only elementary plastics. Who has been to a plastic production facility here? Ituko has been. You went to Mr. Green. Yeah. Plastics, they start as petroleum, but once they are made into the basic material, the basic plastic material, they have like small balls, different colors, like they call pellets. Those are primary plastics. And secondary plastics, so intermediate products, are parts of, for example, the camera that we have here, it has some shells, some structural materials, like the pens that we have, the cap. Cap alone is not a finished product, it's a part of pen. So when considering only a pen is a good example because it contains a lot of plastic, but it also contains metal, also contains ink, right? So it's not a fully plastic product, but mostly, maybe 95, 98%. A pen doesn't come in these statistics. I'm talking only primary plastics, so pellets, and intermediate products like the cap. Only fully plastic products, $1.2 trillion. If you consider plastics embedded into other products like the computer of Julian, my shirts, my shoes, then this value, I don't know, the sky's the limit. Imagine the amount of plastics embedded in my car or in textiles. It's huge. So very large trade, $1.2 trillion a year. But when I talk about plastics, we always should have in mind that plastics is part of the materials space. Back in the days of Marxism, mid-19th century, the material space had other dominant players, like wood, like leather, like cotton, like wool, like glass. We should always compare or be mindful that we can return to those materials, perhaps with a new clothing of modernity. So this is why UNCTAD and other partners, we can try to classify materials according to two categories, basically. So we have plastics, then you have plastic substitutes, known as non-plastic substitutes, and plastic alternatives, which are supposedly better plastics, or plastic with some kind of more desirable characteristics. Plastic substitutes, I'm talking about natural fibers like cotton, wool, jute, the seaweed. I'm talking about glass, minerals, right? Metals like aluminum, stainless steel, copper. Those of you who pop by in India or have Indian roots, and I know that many here have, they have their cutlery and the plates mostly metal. Or in Europe is more ceramics, right? So those are plastic substitutes. Aluminium, one of the biggest substitutes in the world. Often those materials they can perform similar functions as plastics, the container function, the bearer function, but often they're more expensive or heavy. You have also plastic alternatives, which are materials like bioplastics, plastics coming from renewable feedstock. A bioplastic doesn't mean it degrades. This pen or this candy wrapper can be made of a bioplastic and still pollute. It just means that instead of using petroleum, you might have used corn, cassava, or seaweed to make a non-degradable bioplastic. So this is what bioplastic. You could have a biodegradable plastic. So a biodegradable plastic is one that will decay through erosion, like sand in the ocean, to being rubbed against air or sand or other materials, or by bacterial or thermal activity. Biodegradable plastics, there are different types, some that can degrade in the environment, so they call it whole compostable. So you put it in the garden, eventually it will disappear after, could be a while, the standard, 6 months, 2 years. And you can have industrially compostable ones. Those are a bit dangerous. When you hear industrially compostable plastics, it will degrade, but only if you put it in a huge tank and increase the temperature to 50, 60 degrees. Perhaps in Zanzibar, you can have 50, 60 degrees, but most parts of the world, you don't achieve that temperature, so that those biodegradable plastics like PLA will not start to degrade. So they're a bit dangerous. There could be consumer mislabeling or consumer misinformation. So, again, those are some examples of marine-based plastic substitutes, very relevant for Zanzibar. The sea, so the seabed can provide minerals, silicates, provide seaweeds. They can be transformed into cellulosic materials, into plastic alternatives. Coral stone, I think the whole stone town is built on coral stone. So all those are marine-based substitutes. We have a full report launched on this. This is just one example of what I didn't think it was possible. You can actually make paper or make cellulosic materials from seaweeds. Plus a UK company that does this, or you can make things like the sachets that are edible, that's also made of seaweed. And very interestingly, those burger or coffee cups that you are using now, it seems to be paper, right? It's a plastic substance, but not really. Most coffee cups, if not all, I think all, have coatings. The coatings are, I think we discussed this yesterday, are plastics. So they have a film or kind of paints, resin, and that is synthetic to give it waterproofing abilities. Like Mirko mentioned yesterday, some other materials like keratin from insects or crustaceans or seaweeds can also do the coating, the barrier function to keep it waterproof. This is why a cup is not immediately recyclable. Jennifer can also talk a bit more than she knows the process of recycling paper. So this is an example of a plastic alternative, meaning a project that UNCTAD and the UK government through the SMEP program are funding to develop the impossible, but it turned out to be possible, which is biodegradable fishing gear. So fishing gear is a especially complicated one because once most fishing gear lasts from 3 to 4 years. 4 years, they get damaged, they lost the ocean very often. And once they are lost, they keep fishing, right? But for thousands of years, just the fish dies there. And by having biodegradable fishing gear, it increases the safety. So when it's lost, it sinks. And within 2 years, it should be degraded by microorganisms. It's being tested now. This is just to show that plastics, I mean, it's a recent story that it mushroomed so big. Until 2010, more or less, the trade in non-plastic substitutes, so materials like glass, cotton, ceramics, was higher than plastics. And then in the last 15 years, that plastics really took off. I mean, we all remember, right, going to the bar or the supermarket, bringing a crate of Coca-Cola glasses to get the new ones, because that's how things were before. So this was the moment of change, around 2010. And the interesting thing to think about is that, I mean, we survived, and life was fun too, 2010. the world of with less plastics can also be a totally livable and interesting world. Anyways, it just to give you perhaps a bit hard for you to see, but the trade in plastics, and this is for the year 2000, so this is why the value is a bit smaller. So $1 trillion for the year 2000 in trade in plastics. Trade in plastics substitutes around $400 billion. So plastic substitutes like glass, aluminum, clay, natural fibers, significantly large as well, 1/3 here, 300, $400 billion. But plastic alternatives like bioplastics, very small market so far. So while you see them often in terms of the cups, the bottles, all this is biodegradable, this is a very small market because the weight of paper cup, plastic cups compared to the weight of plastics used in structural applications like construction or in a car doesn't compare. So plastic alternatives are very small in the world, but they're growing fast. Most plastic substitutes, so most non-plastic materials are traded as raw materials, and only 1/3 is traded as products, like value-added products. Bringing this context to here, to a place like Zanzibar, it's very important if you have, for example, seaweeds. It's very important to have the capability to transform seaweed from its raw state into a value-added product, like making seaweed soap or that we already have here, but to transform seaweed into plastic polymers, you need an industrial facility. It's not that trivial, but that's where the money is. So that's where the huge price per kilogram is. So adding value to non-plastic substitutes is a very important area for entrepreneurs and innovators. Yeah, I mean, we have some work on labeling as well, because often you buy things or you see products that have a claim of I am recyclable, or I'm a bioplastic, or bio-based, renewable-based, biodegradable. But those things can mean different things. And you can get normal plastics, add some sugars to it, so that bacteria will eat part of it and it will fragment, it will break down into smaller plastic particles that will not fragment further. So the real biodegradable plastic is the plastic that degrades into water and CO2. If it fully degrades, it just becomes elementary particles, chemical particles. That's a full degradation. If it gets only down to microplastics, it becomes a problem, not a solution. Open countries treat plastics better than they treat non-plastics. So this is just a brief brush at the import tariffs. We look at materials like paper, jute, hemp, cotton, and how much, in average, countries are charging to import cotton, jute, and so on, compared to some plastic products. And you see that the yellow points there are higher. So often, to import, for example, natural fiber like cotton, it costs more than to import polyethylene. So this makes plastic substitution expensive. So there is no level playing field, or perhaps the market is not seen through those eyes of material choice, right? So the most economical choice is always plastic. This is why we're trapped in this situation. I was looking at comparing some plastic substitutes, direct plastic substitutes with plastic equivalents, and I looked at bags and straws and cups. And one interesting thing I saw is that I looked at all the groupings of the UN country groupings, like the small island states, LDCs, Africa, high-income countries, and in most cases, the price of substitutes is higher. So plastics are cheaper to import, so the tariffs are higher for substitutes here. Here the import tariffs are higher for plastics. So in most country groupings in the world, it's more expensive to import something that is not a plastic. Plastics win. And finally, we also looked at, okay, but non-plastics, they already face this tariff disadvantage in countries. How are they being regulated domestically? Like, what are the rules of Tanzania, Brazil, or France on glass, on cotton? Are those rules at the same stringency level as the rules on plastic? So we had a look on those regulations, material-specific regulations, And we noticed an interesting pattern that non-plastic substitutes, or materials that are not plastics, the focus of the regulation keep them safe for human health. Like the focus on glass standards is to make the glass inert, non-contaminated, and apt for food content. The focus on cotton is to avoid additives that can be harmful, like the ones that contains persistent organic pollutants, the famous POPs that induce toxicity and cancer, and so on. So there is a lot of regulation already on things like aluminum, cotton, glass, metals. So those regulations need to be taken into consideration once you add regulations on plastics. Because it's dangerous that if you over-regulate the sector, be it substitutes or plastics, you might suffocate one sector and not the other. So there needs to be a bit of a level playing field, of course, taking into consideration the environmental impact of each. And this is just types of environmental measures that apply to non-plastic substitutes. It's technical, but just to pay attention to those 2 points. A lot of developing countries are regulating non-plastics. So East Africa has many regulations on non-plastics, on paper, but the real financial power, the financial muscle to help, for example, innovators to develop plastic substitutes is missing. For example, tax concessions, like the government to abdicate a tax revenue to facilitate a certain industry or some sector. For example, now paper products do not pay VAT anymore. For example. Only 3 developing countries are doing that. 7 developed countries that we mapped do that. Grants and direct payments. So this is more. It's like the program what we are doing through the UK. UK put money to develop, for example, plastic alternatives, like the biodegradable fishing nets. So we found 8 regulations of developed countries that actually provide a subsidy scheme for the development of those materials, while for developing countries only 1. So very few countries have that actually active fiscal capacity to inject money into the problem, to develop alternatives. Most developing countries can only use control measures, command and control. So you cannot sell plastic bags, but they don't do like we are putting now, I don't know, X million shillings to develop a biodegradable or compostable plastic bag. So controlling for public authorities is cheaper than subsidizing the innovation, right? So we looked at the different instruments that countries are using. The government of Kenya recently, some of you know it as well, issued a regulation asking for organic waste to be put into biodegradable bags in the whole country. There was a question on whether biodegradable, what kind of standards, what a biodegradable bag was. So we brought together the International Standards Organization, ISO, and an NGO in Nairobi to discuss which standards exist that could contain Kenya's legislation and the legislation of other countries. We brought also Nigeria and Ghana to participate, the standards authorities and environmental executive agencies. And this is a problem that exists in many countries. In France, in Italy, Taiwan, they all have issues related to standards. If you want something to be biodegradable, you need to link it with a standard. Otherwise, it can't mean anything, right? It just becomes a rhetorical exercise. But let me get to the topic of the presentation, which is just 3 slides. You see that this is complicated. It's part of us. It's our clothes. It's inside us now, inside our brains. It makes our life cheaper. And if we didn't have plastics, our incomes will not go as far. We'd be paying more for packaging, most likely, unless if it's reusable. Reusable are the best. So the world is trying 3 ways to deal with plastic pollution, right? The first one is the one that we already have, like country regulations. For example, Rwanda's ban, actually a successful ban on single-use plastic items, especially bags. Kenya has a similar one, I think Tanzania as well, with different levels of enforcement stringency. But those are national initiatives, right? Brazil has its policy, Taiwan, Japan, Switzerland, the EU have, but that's a very fragmented world. Everybody doing their thing, everybody having their labeling requirements. Like Canada, in Canada, when you get a paper cup, like a coffee cup, it says, compostable, but in industrial facilities that may not be available in your area. Like a cigarettes warning, right? Because if you put that cup, if you throw that cup in the ground, it will stay there forever. Because it contains plastic coating. So it's a mandatory requirement in Canada that paper cups warn consumers that what they're handling is actually not degradable. Right? It's degradable only in a special context where it's generally not going to. So one way is to try to deal with the problem bottom up. Countries, initiatives, fragmented, 200 programs in the world. There are many countries in the world, even subnational programs that exist. Very complicated. The other way is to try to do it top down. Try to have one single set of rules or basic rules that try to harmonize how countries deal with plastics globally. A bit like what was done with lead gasoline, there is also an agreement by the EU on a reduction of hazardous substances. When you buy a cell phone or a cable, you see this ROHS symbol, which is a standard that shows that persistent organic pollutants are used only to a responsible concentration in your product. And because before that, people could load things with a UV stabilizer and other things that could be giving you cancer. But there was an agreement between the EU and other countries picked that up to do that. So the idea of the ozone treaty, the Minamata Convention for mercury, the Basel Convention or the Rotterdam Convention on organic pollutants. So there are examples of many multilateral environmental agreements that dealt with the specific pollutants. But the problem of plastics is that plastics is so inbred into us now. It's so big, right? In so many areas. So the INC, which stands for Intergovernmental Negotiation Committee, to develop a legally binding agreement on plastic pollution or legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, call it a plastics treaty, global plastics treaty, tries to first use a life cycle approach to deal with plastics. So looking at production, transformation, and disposal and recovery of plastics that is already on the nature. So from A to Z, very ambitious. It looks at various areas like limiting the initial production of plastics, creating quotas of production. Dealing with waste management and how waste management should be done in more or less harmonized across the world. How to approach microplastics, for example, standards for clarification of standards for biodegradability, so that biodegradation doesn't lead to more microplastics, and alternative plastics and non-plastic substitutes. So this is why we looked at the regulation on glass, paper, non-plastic substitutes, because we want to have a bit of a level playing field between what is being proposed for plastics and what is being proposed for non-plastic substitutes. Especially wanted to highlight that non-plastic substitutes like glass and aluminum are already regulated in many parts of the world, and they are already regulated, especially based on human health. So if you would double the regulation on non-plastic substitutes because you are regulating plastics now, you just keep plastic substitutes very expensive, even more expensive than they are, and then you give a further advantage to plastics. So this is why you have to think across the sector. And this of those areas here, like production limits, waste management, non-plastic, the most contentious, the most politically challenging are production limits. Some countries do not agree at all with any idea or any suggestion to limit production of polymers, of plastic polymers. And in many countries, it's not the north, the south, the east, the west, they do not want to commit to a production reduction. And the other complicated area is financial frameworks. Who is going to pay for it? Okay, if countries need to revamp or invest more in waste management capacity, but they don't have the public budget to do that, who's going to pay for it? Are we going to institute a global plastic tax? Countries like Ghana and the East African community, they are interested in proposing that. And some countries already have plastic tax, a bottle tax, to create the funds, and these funds will develop infrastructure to deal with the problem. shall we have the regular public budget doing that? Shall we create finance like a bond or something? This is complicated because in the end, someone will have to pay, either the taxpayer, the industry, or definitely, certainly the consumer, for the cost of this transition. So this is a complicated area, and the production limits perhaps is the even more complicated area of this approach. 170 countries negotiating this. It's a very complex negotiation. This is the photo I took in Nairobi during INC3. We are in INC 5 now, and they couldn't finish INC 5.1 in Korea. Now they're going to have the final, hopefully, round of negotiations in Geneva in August. And it's almost as big as the climate agreement in terms of impact, in terms of practical, visible impact in our lives. But it's very, in terms of negotiation challenge, is super hard. And you have the international initiatives. You have the international program of the countries or project of the country negotiated treaty to deal with plastics around the world. But you have also the regional initiatives. And here in East Africa, and I'm happy that Honorable Ali Machano from Zanzibar will come tomorrow to say some words. He's a member of the East African Legislative Assembly. He is involved in the bill, so the legislation proposal to harmonize the laws against single-use plastics in East Africa, so only 7 EC countries. So there are regional initiatives, like the European Union has a single-use plastics directive. East Africa has this legislation proposal in the regional assembly, which still has to be voted. So those regional initiatives, they can sometimes people ask me, oh, do they contradict the global treaty? I say no. Since they are focused mostly on regulating specific products like single-use plastics, they are very complementary. They reinforce aspects of a potential global treaty. And also if the global treaty fails, if countries not agree, it's a possibility. The regional initiatives will become the second best. Will become the next in the line of hope to deal with the problem. But there are other parts of the world, the Pacific regions. I don't know if you've been, some of you had a chance to go to the Pacific. Those are very small island states, except of Papua New Guinea or Australia, of course. But in general, very small island states, and all the plastics they get, not through domestic production, but through trade. So they struggle with the metabolism. So take the material in, deal with the materials in the island, and also they don't have usually the economic rationale to ship it out. So there's a lot of regional struggles, lack of scales. Places like Tonga, it's like 10,000 people, the population of the country. So they have grouped into Pacific Environmental Program, Ocean Litter Program to deal with that. And ASEAN also has a circular economy program, but those are more say capacity building technical assistance programs, not to the level of legislation like you or in East Africa where you propose. So there is also this level of governance. In that sense, Santi-san, I hope that I gave you some more depth, nuanced to the plastics problem. Happy to take questions.
Yeah, let's appreciate meeting. Maybe I can just start with something because of your SMEP program, because I know a lot of journalists here would be interested to know the different programs you're working on in different countries, some follow-up for their stories. So could you just highlight, especially for the represented countries, whether they are the programs you're working on and where the programs are at right now?
The SMEP program is a collaboration between the United Nations, so UNCTAD, the agency where I work for, and the donor, the UK government. And it has currently 23 projects in different areas. Plastics is the first area, is the first starts. I have textiles as well. And by the way, textiles contain a lot of plastics. We have leather, so tanneries, very dirty. We all love leather, but it's very dirty to make. Organic waste, so intercepting, for example, waste from fish farms, from the sewage in Nairobi. And the fifth project is on batteries, so lead acid batteries. talked about lead and gasoline, we also work on lead, but in batteries. Because in some countries, it's just the e-mobility is just too expensive, like the lithium batteries. So people go for lead, which is cheaper, but very toxic, and recycled informally. Anyways, so on plastics, we have a lot of projects in Africa. Actually, all of them are in Africa. We have the one in South Africa. Well, it's a Swedish-South African Kenyan collaboration. They make the polymer in Sweden. They spin the fishing gear in fishing nets and ropes in South Africa. And they're testing here with the Kenyan Maritime and Fisheries Organization in the coast near Mombasa. They are making biodegradable fishing gear. So this is one project. We have in Ghana a project that is intercepting plastics from rivers called River Recycle. We have in Nigeria a project that is doing container-sized modular plastics recycling unit that have solar roofs and do not require energy from the grid. It's a bit like a franchise of plastics, and they use e-bikes to collect the plastic. They use traceability like the Internet of Things, really fancy data tracking things. To know what's the distance between the collection point and the arrival point, the price per kilogram. Because as you know, plastics markets are often informal. Plastic picking is an informal sector, and so there's no data in many cities. A city like Lagos, the whole reverse metabolism of aluminum cans picking or plastic picking, it's a bit of a data gap or a data shadow. You don't know, but this project creates that type of data and also modules. So this project is called GIVO, Garbage In, Value Out, GIVO Africa. And that's actually a website. Let's see, I have an overlay. So we have this online. Much better with a visual aid. Yes. Fresh Pack is, the one that I mentioned. River Recycle intercepts plastic from rivers. Gaia Biomaterials make the biodegradable fishing nets. Flip Floppy project very near us here in the Lamu Archipelago. They make boats and heritage furniture out of recovered plastics. Very quite famous. We have one in South Africa called Agri Bio Motion. So they are making biodegradable motion. Plastics do not only affect the ocean, right? They affect also the lands. And for agriculture, when you use the plastic films to preserve moisture, and with climate change, you need more and more plastic film. The problem worse. Those plastic fragments, they're not really recovered. They fragment, and then you put a new layer of plastic next to it, and a new layer. Eventually, the fragmented plastic will become so small that it will go to the roots of the plants and will eat them as microplastics. So this is trying to make biodegradable emulsions that will degrade fully. There's the Shinhoi in Zimbabwe that makes roofs and construction material out of recovered plastics. This one is actually quite very successful. The Fresh Produce Impact Hub. They are replacing much films as well, but not for biodegradable plastics, but just by another type of biomass. So they are getting coconut wire, so piece of coconut from the coconut plantations in Ghana, and using the coconut shells instead of using plastic. So this is the ideal, using biomass to do mulching, to soil protection is the ideal practice, and they are doing that attached to the value chain of a larger exporter called the Blue Skies Group, which is ready functioning and operational company. You have the plastic to car projects, which is interesting. I visited there, it's in Nepal. Once you add some logistics difficulty to the plastic problem, the problem becomes much bigger. In Nepal, as you know, they have a lot of mountains. And if you're in a village in a mountain, or a village in a far away in rural Kenya or Uganda, you have, in Tanzania, you have more difficulties because scrap waste plastics have low value, right? So people collect this and recycle it in urban areas, but not in a mountain. So they are deploying modular, simple plastics manufacturing machines to communities in mountainous regions in Nepal. Yeah, and this is the garbage in value out project using modular containers. And you can see the solar panels here. It's important because this is Nigeria, and in Nigeria, the electricity supply is intermittent. It stops often. So by having the solar power and batteries there, the plastic is grinding, because they need to grind the PET bottles to sell the flakes. That's how they make money. So the plastic grinding doesn't stop. You always have power to process it, and they will also create data and potentially sell this data to the local governments to allow the government to understand how the plastics metabolism within Lagos huge city where it is happening. So yes, we have 10 projects. Initially, we have 8 that are active, and that's the plastics intervention under the SMEP project. Oh, this is the project, right? On the field. But UNCTAD, we do the connections between the projects, the INC process and the East Africa. We have to sponsor events on biodegradability and compostability together with ISO in Nairobi. We brought in the parliamentarians from EALA, the East African Legislative Assembly, also to Nairobi to discuss the single-use plastic bill in the region. So our role is to be like an umbilical cord between the projects and the policy. So we connect, we don't allow, because otherwise it will be just a set of loose projects, right? For example, next week I'll be in Nairobi monitoring some of those projects. In one month and a half from now, I'll be in the World Circular Economy Forum in Brazil, bringing some of those grantees, for example, the ones that replace plastic in agriculture for agricultural biomass, and they will be discussing together with 3,000 people there in Brazil from all over the world similar practices. Because this is a problem not only from Africa, not only from East Africa, it's an issue that South America, Asia, also faces. We are going to have probably a side event to present, or we participate in the WTO dialogue on plastics, so to look at which type of measures countries can take to control plastics. This is an important question, so but in Greek, one of those things, what can you actually do? What can you actually do? The journalist should ask, you can take action at the border, say, okay, export quotas. You cannot export, you can only export X amount of plastic. Import quotas, you can limit importation of plastic. You can add import license. You can play with tariffs for the product that is undesirable or polluting. So there are measures that countries can take at the border, the measures that countries can take domestically, like labeling, standardized mandatory labeling, investment regulation, operation license. But the recycling factory might have an operation license. When you recycle PET, so when you get this might be polypropylene or LDPE, but once you recycle any plastics, basically, I mean, this is in touch with the candy, right? It will be sticky. Often you need to wash plastics. And when you wash plastics, you usually wash it with hot water, the stickiness, impurities come out. But then you're dealing with water. You're dealing with a tank the size of this room, the size of 3 times this room of water every day, of dirty water with a lot of impurities. And an operating license might work, for example, okay, if you have to wash your plastics to resell your recycled plastics, which companies do, you need to take care of the water. So that would be part of an operation license for a factory, a recycler to work. So there are many instruments that governments can adopt at the border and domestically to control plastics. So we created that list first. We made it nice, but it's shown here. To try to equip negotiators with, okay, what can you do? What can you do in your context? Those are the tools.
Any other question for Enrique? No?
What is the importance of any innovations linked to the fact? I'm sorry. What is the importance of innovations dealing with the plastics in the fight against climate change?
The usage of fossil fuels, like gasoline, diesel, is slowly going down. It's still going up, it's losing steam, and it's getting up to a plateau. The usage of plastic is not. Usage of plastic is growing. Fossil fuels, gasoline, diesel, kerosene, and plastics, in a way, are the same thing. They are fossil carbon. 99% of plastics in the world are from fossil fuels, petroleum. So plastics add to climate change, especially because plastics are burnt in many places. Waste management incinerations is a common practice. So plastics add to the carbon of the atmosphere as well. So what plastics can be done? We could have plastics coming from renewable biomass, seaweed, corn, potatoes, and but then who wants to create a world where all like our cups or PVC pipes and phone cables are produced with renewable plastics? We could do it, but that doesn't add the carbon, doesn't add more fossil carbon to the atmosphere, doesn't increase climate change, but create competition for land. Like then, some of you might have covered as journalists the issue of food versus fuel. Okay, we grow biofuels, ethanol to run our cars, or we grow corn trees. Do we want to create such a dilemma for our material systems as well? Probably not. So we cannot replace all the fossil plastics we have today that are increasing climate change with renewable plastics coming from agriculture that increase competition for land. That'll be a disaster. And land is very expensive in most parts of the world. Even increasing sea 1,000 times will not do the trick. We need to get to reuse, like the Romans did. Like we reused our cups. We have more water filtration machines or devices at home. We put dirty water up, we go through a ceramic, and come down clean. Like the Romans did that 2,000 years ago. They didn't have a bottle at home. We survived. We need to have better water distribution activities. I'm talking water because water is very, very easy to grasp. They're leaving water to a pipe, the water comes clean, you can drink immediately, or you're leaving water to a bottle, plastic bottle. So every time you drink, you create a plastic filter. That's insane. We are in this situation now. So we need to cut the connection between fossil fuels and plastics. We use renewable plastics, but if we do that, we cannot just replace fossil fuel-based plastic cup for renewable-based plastic cup. Because if we do that, we will destroy our land system because we need so much land to produce the biomass for that. So we need to use less plastics. Reuse is the only way, and changing the system, like using more filters instead of using more bottles, is more questions. Okay.
Sorry. You mentioned llamas. I would like to know the local solutions the community is doing, or rather also the organization. What are the issues that you are doing to bring them out?
This is the nicest project. You feel the best once you're in the field. I've never been there, but I heard so much about it. And I was just with the founder of this international body in Geneva, and it was exposing his projects there that maybe we can talk. I think the interesting thing about the flip-floppy project in Lambo is that they connected one traditional heritage industry, which was boat building and furniture building, the handicraft ability of artisans to make beautiful things out of wood, but they managed to translate that skill to plastics. So they recover the plastics, they color the plastics blue, red, green, and then they would work the plastics to make, for example, a lamp or a chair. Even King Charles went there to use it. That's one of their products. So that fact that connects the culture, creative economy industry of the local and the heritage knowledge of people, together with the depollution aspects, and the fact that I think that when the project entered and supported financially, they were able to finally start paying higher price to the pickers, the collectors, so that this developed a backward chain of collection, segregation, organization of waste in the archipelago, in the community, which did not exist before. Because before it was just market force, right? If you collect some bottles, if there's a buyer, I'll sell it, but there was no systematic stock organization storage. So it not only, in order to produce their beautiful products, they had to work backwards and create a de facto waste management system for collection and sorting and processing for plastics in that region. And the tricky thing that Mr. Prabhati mentioned is that Lamu, as an island, it's archipelago, is small. So it will never be as big as the large processors of plastics like Takataka or Mr. Green in Nairobi, who have a lot of scale. So once you increase scale, it decreases the cost, right? In an island, you always have a higher cost per kilogram of plastics that you collect, per kilogram of plastic that you transform into beautiful furniture. So one thing he mentions that not everything needs or can turn a profit or become or be scaled up. Because in an island, you don't need to scale up. You just need to deal with the problem. Right? But to deal with the problem, it might not be economic. So they might spend more than they make by selling the plastics and selling the plastic products. So I think, but the same thing is with water or transport networks. Some bus routes in Dar es Salaam, for example, are profitable. A lot of people use them. Other bus routes are not profitable. Less people use them. But you want to have profitable and non-profitable bus routes in order for the entire city to be connected. Otherwise, you will neglect half the population. Right? So it's normal that some areas, especially waste management, is not a profitable sector. And I think that project creates an interesting case for the importance of really making this becoming part of the local government funded, so that there is small scale but functional waste management system in a very fragile area. Because you probably want to control waste management, not only for the environmental imperative, but also for the tourism and trash. And the area requires aesthetics and beauty in order to keep attractive to the tourists. So yeah, but I'm happy to connect you with flip-flop, any of you, with any of those products if you want to interview them or have a conversation.
Okay, last one, so that we can accommodate.
The bank myth. There is something that you say that some of the alternatives to plastic are even more polluting than the plastics themselves. Is this true? Because, for example, in Kenya, we banned the plastic bag and we introduced it. People are saying this is even worse than the plastic bag that we banned. Is this true?
So actually, Kenya and Rwanda, Tanzania, they changed one plastic bag, polyethylene plastic bag for a polypropylene non-woven plastic bag. So it's just changing from one type of plastic bag to another type of plastic bag. But the new type of plastic bag is more expensive, so people use it less. So that has an effect, the decrease in usage. So it's very tricky to do functional material change. And as you said, you don't want to do regrettable substitution. Just gonna put this slide here that you showed before. Right. Yeah. So this is just a comparison between plastic plates in yellow with banana plates, banana leaf plates, a substitute in green. And when you compare materials, you cannot just compare the cost, right? So that's very shallow. You have to compare terrestrial acidification. So what is the impact on soils of making banana plates, making plastic? Water consumption, terrestrial ecotoxicity. Do you kill the material on the land? You tax your ecosystems. marine ecotoxicity, carcinogenic ecotoxicity. So those terms, ozone formation, climate change effects. So those terms are life cycle analysis categories. So they compare making one banana plate with making one plastic plate, then they compare. What you can see here is that some banana leaf plates, for example, terrestrial ecotoxicity, the banana leaf plate has 80% of the impact compared to 21. So the banana leaf plate will have a higher impact. Of course, if you look at fossil fuel scarcity, so the use of fossil fuel, plastic plates will have a higher impact. So depending on the category you look at, plastic can perform better or worse than a natural or plastic substitute. And often the substitute is heavier as well, so by being heavier, it's more expensive and cause more emissions to transport. But there are a few things. If you only look at that, you can come to the conclusion, oh, actually, plastics are great. Let's do nothing. Plastics have a long life. They do not degrade. So if you look at the afterlife of those materials, plastics will persist, the natural materials will not. Or the metals will be inert, not really affect much the environment. So this is one, for example, fishing gear or microplastics, the subsequent effect of microplastics. That's one. And the other one is the employment density. To make natural materials, usually you employ more labor than to make plastics at large scale. So then there might be a higher, especially at smaller scales of production, higher social inclusion for plastic substitutes than there is for plastics. So this also needs to be taken into account because you want to create jobs.
Thank you, and hi everyone. I hope I will be able to explain the plastic conversation from the East Africa point of view with such an insightful way. And he has been able to open up a lot of topics that I will be able to pick up in our conversation. So I started to work on plastic for East Africa in 2020 when I joined the Africa Leadership Network. The Africa Legal Network. Who we are? We are the leading African firm in one of the top leading African law firms in the continent. And we are the founding members of the Africa Legal Alliance. We have started in 2017 to work on a draft bill to harmonize the legislation in East Africa. And when I joined the firm in 2020, I thought that trying to submit this bill at the East African Parliament level and being able to implement the bill throughout the region would have given East Africa a competitive advantage in the industry. And also would have helped to harmonize the legislation. This is the team that has been employed and is being used for this. As you can see, I'm leading the business development, marketing and communication, but I'm also leading the initiative for the plastic. We have actively engaged 3 partners and a team of 4 associates, plus since several months, an external lawyer that is supporting us from a legal perspective to push the conversation forward. So it's a big group and a big effort. We are all working on a pro bono basis. And we have the plastic conversation at heart. I won't go through the conversation of the Global Plastic Treaty since Enrique has already explained it quite deeply. But what I would like to take you through is what we have done and how we have covered from a East African perspective. Is available the latest report on the legislation in East Africa, is on our website, but also on the website of the Flip-Floppy project that you have heard from Enrique several times. We are also working with them to promote the East Africa bill, but also on many other advocacy, capacity building, and education projects. So on their website, and even Julian can probably share that report. We have the report on where are we from an East African perspective in terms of legislation on plastic. And you are going to see that a lot of countries have already done several efforts on the plastic conversation. I don't apologize for this, but I haven't included yet Somalia in this presentation. It is on the report that I was mentioning. So as you can see, we have done quite a lot in East Africa. And that is why it is very important to have a legislative approach in East Africa to harmonize the legislation and put all of the country at pair, so that we can push the industry to advance, but also we can push further trade. At the moment, is still not unified enough to facilitate the conversation, facilitate trade, and the advancement and progress of the industry. I agree with Enrique that controlling is often better, but I would also suggest, and this is what what our bill does, is that we need incentive. We need industry incentive that can support the growth of the conversation and the development of innovative solution in East Africa. We have, as Enrique has said, we have some innovation that is happening, but we need to push it even further. There is a conversation, for example, in Kenya, to create a tax-free zone for this industry, but is still at a concept note conversation rather than becoming something that could be applied quickly. So give me 3 seconds because I need to, yeah, thank you. So what are we trying to do is to have a regional approach, and the bill has aligned with several of the available legislation on plastic. When we started to work in 2017, we were working with another law firm called Slaughter & May in London to have their support to dig into the European, in the US legislation, to make sure that when we were proposing something for East Africa, we would have created an environment which could have facilitate the conversation, facilitate trade, and put us in a competitive advantage. So the East African bill, SUP bill, as we call it, take in consideration the legislation in Europe and other legislation inclusive of the Global Plastic Treaty. We have also recently had several engagements throughout the last few years with the business association, with all the members of parliament, but also with the government in East Africa. And we have made sure that the SUP bill is also aligned with what other, not just Kenya, but what other part of other countries in East Africa are doing. such as Tanzania or Rwanda. We also take into consideration the alignment of the community. Is very important that we take in consideration what is happening at the community level in East Africa. There are, as many of you know, the plastic have no boundaries, and it's probably we have more boundaries when it comes to land and trans-border transport, but when it comes to our ocean, for example, there is no different. I was recently on a site visit and training in Lamu, and some of their beaches and mangroves are facing plastic that is not even local, and this is due to the current in the ocean. So this is an important consideration, and we need to make sure that the East African community is aligned on this. Enforceability, the draft bill provides a clear enforcement mechanism that needs to be adopted by all the partner states. And this feature, for example, is not present in the draft 0 of the plastic treaty. So it's very important, as Enrique mentioned, that if and when the global treaty will be passed, and how it will pass, is that we still have at the regional level an harmonized approach to plastic, so that we also have our own solution, and we are not just impose what is coming from the global needs. And if you just if you just look at what is happening, for example, with the European legislation on plastic recently, it's very important that our countries in East Africa start to lead the conversation so that they can be prepared to meet what are the standards required for Europe, for example. Is still a bit to go, but is very important. Timeline for implementation. I have the feeling that we have the opportunity to implement the SUP bill before the global treaty is implemented. I always had this feeling, and but again, it's very difficult sometimes to predict what is going to happen. But this would have really put our region at a different conversation, even in the negotiation that the African countries are putting forward during the negotiation at INC. So where we are, the bill has been tabled at the East African Assembly, and once that is where we are now is, and I think you have an MP or in the room or is going to be there tomorrow. What we have tabled the bill, and now the bill is at the it's under revision of the legislative committee. So we are waiting for that step to just move it forward. I was informed that the East African Parliament is not going to meet in March, so I'm waiting to understand when this will happen. But we are hoping to present this bill at the Parliament level. So once that the Speaker of the Assembly passed the bill to the head of state for assessment, and then the bill is assented to by all the head of state, is passed as an act. If not, it goes back to the Assembly. so there is a bit still to go. What we are confident is that this harmonization will be pushed at the civil society level. For example, as the flip-floppy has started a petition, and we are hoping that through your help as well, there are going to be much more signatories, and that the civil society can respond and can push this. We have been working with the business association, so this is also another area that we have explored to create awareness and to continue to work in that direction, because we believe that this bill is good also for businesses. I will just go very quickly through the bill so that you can understand some of the you can connect the dot with the conversation that also sorry, I just realized I didn't put my videos. Apologize for that. So some of the conversation that Enrique was having. There are some salient features of the draft single-use plastic bill, and these are the prohibition of the manufacture, import, sale, use, and piling and disposal. Clear, visible, and legible marking on the packaging. And I think Enrique mentioned labeling. It is very important, not just for a consumer awareness point of view, but also from a circular economy point of view, that our labels are much more descriptive than what they are right now. And I'm aware that they not just lacking in terms of packaging, but also in terms of the ingredients and other topics. So this is very important. There is a lot of awareness from a business point of view, but we are hoping that also from a consumer perspective and civil society perspective, this will be pushed because it's becoming essential. Recycling, segregation, and collection mechanism. Again, we need to create an environment where this is becoming something that is essential. The infrastructure are very weak, so we need to support the building of infrastructure for recycle, segregation, and collection of the plastic, among other things. And each country is taking some approach that are very different, but we are all moving in that direction. Permitted use for single-use plastic, sustainable reduction of consumption. And this again is through education, through creation of awareness. I just give you a basic example. We have plastic straw. We need to create awareness, and consumer needs to be more aware that they can make a choice there, because that is what is becoming important. So again, as throughout, this slide, emphasis on awareness and education is very important. UNCTAD is doing a lot on this sense, and many other organizations, but we need to continue on this. Incentive, as I said before, we can create mechanisms for controlling, but it is very important that we also create at the East African level suggestion and provide suggestion for incentive, so that the entire industry can develop and we can see more innovation coming through and more solution. The bill provides some definition and interpretation. The bill will be distributed. This presentation can be distributed, so you can look at it, but I think you had a few days already, so I won't go in details on that. So I will also regulation of single-use plastic and exemption. I think what I would like to look at it now is that what we are trying to do is production, manufacture, distribution, sell, use of export, and or sell any product listed in this bill to be banned. And this is, again, to avoid any piling and disposal in public spaces and transboundary movement for SUP products and eliminate the illegal trade. The rationale is to promote the adoption of more sustainable and eco-friendly alternative, encourage responsible waste disposal practices, effects of pollution do not recognize political boundaries, as I said before, foster a shared responsibility in addressing a common environmental challenge. These are the list that has been put together. As you can see, we are not talking about something that is impossible to achieve. And we, after 1 month or 1 month, more than actually 3 months of stakeholder engagement with the private sector, we have seen that they now know much better what is this plastic sub bill, and is something that is feasible and is something that, as I said, taking in consideration legislation that are already available. So is a question of, are we able to find alternative? One of the most probably discussed topic is the crisp packets. Then more than anyone else, simply because the food producers are concerned that of the fact that the package can keep the freshness of the product. But we are working with companies such as Pepsi and other to help this bill to listen to all the conversation and support innovation. We are aware that there are certain products that cannot be substituted. So product for medical purposes, forensic purposes, scientific, industrial purposes, agriculture and forestry, printing and construction industry. So these will find a way to be exempted simply because they are not possible to be yet to be substitute. I think most of the country we are discussing have already established waste management laws. And these laws particularly refer to mechanisms for waste management, but not specifically address the single-use plastic, which is the rationale behind our bill. So what we need to do is make sure that this bill is supplement an already existing waste management law, address the environmental and health challenges, safeguard water bodies by reducing exposure to have more harmful single-use plastic, and then reporting, monitoring, and compliance system to put in place. Labeling, we have discussed this, and Enrique as well. Now, what this will support, we will basically make what we need to make sure is that we support affected, impacted and affected community in creating income opportunities, workforce, training, social program tailored to their needs and priority, create skills and job development within the value chain. Many times we are talking with waste speakers, and this is something that is very relevant. We are following several conversations with a global organization on how we can support waste speaker, for example, so that their salaries are correct and the condition in which they work are also respecting the human rights. Incentivizing manufacturing for finding alternative, promoting labor welfare, and we are aligned with the extended producing responsibility, which many partner states have implemented. I will go because I think this was discussed before. Yeah, this I think is obviously one of our objective is to reduce consumption of single-use plastic. And another one is creation of awareness, which is very much linked also to education of everyone through different tools. Now, as you can see here, we have included sanction and enforcement, and this goes back to what we were saying. This obviously will have to be domesticated. Once is approved, we'll have to, each country will have to adjust this based on what are the as you can see, there are sanctions and there are enforcement of the single-use plastic bill. Summary compliance notice and certificate of compliance is necessary that we enforce what the bill does and that companies and individuals are also compliant. And this is all from me. I wanted to keep it very high level so that you are aware of what is happening with the SUP bill in East Africa. I think to the MC probably now. I don't know if there are questions.
Thank you very much, Carlotta, for your presentation. Let's appreciate Carlotta's presentation. Thank you.
I'm not able to hear you well.
Okay.
Can you hear me well now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I was using a bad mic. So yeah, asante sana for your presentation. Thank you for your time. And I'll give a chance to anyone who has a question about the legal frameworks that are being worked on by Carlotta and her team. Anyone wants to ask a question? No? Okay. Let's, Carlotta, you're going to take a question from one of our colleagues here.
Yeah.
Wow.
Thank you. I would like to ask for an update going forward when the bill is taken to the assembly, the East Africa Assembly, for you to update or we get updates for journalists in the stories And also another thing is, if you have previously, you have had any case, it's a government or an organization or an individual, which you have handled concerning pollution.
Your name and where you come
Okay,
from.
my name is.
I did, okay, so go ahead.
My name is Ruth Miromshari from Capital FM, Nairobi, Kenya.
You got that?
I got the first question. I didn't get the second question.
Let's have it the second question again.
Okay, my second question is, if you have had any case brought to you by an individual or a company concerning pollution. Yes.
All right. I hope you got it now.
Yes, yes.
go
So the
ahead.
first question, yeah. So as I explained through the presentation, the bill was submitted at the East African level through the Committee of Agriculture Tourism, and is sitting now with the Legislative Committee of EAL. We were invited to present the bill in March, but I was just told this morning that the activities of the meeting of Parliament has been postponed due to economic reason, if I'm not if I'm correct. So this is to answer your first question. I mean, as a law firm, have we been asked to deal with some of these issues? I think we have. Obviously we need to keep confidentiality on our client, but as far as most of our work on plastic public is concerned, we have been involved in many conversations on plastic. So we are working with most of the organization like CAPRO, APCRO, with the CAM, with KEPSA, to for example, we have work on the levy, we have work on the biodegradability notice that Enrique was mentioning. So with UNCTAD themselves, we invited them to host that workshop on biodegradability in our office. So we are working with some of the most active actors in Kenya. And beyond Kenya, we are working with CHERDA in Rwanda for the conversation of human rights and plastic. We did a workshop last year. We are continuing to work, and our also work with the Nestlé and Systemic on the living income is the one that will support understanding how we protect our waste pickers in East Africa. As you all know, the waste pickers are basically our infrastructure. So that is an important element. What we are trying to do is understanding what is the model that we can develop in the Southern Hemisphere, East African in particular, that can support the implementation of an infrastructure for plastic, but waste more in general. Did I answer your question, or you want to go further on this?
That's one. Final one.
Okay, I would like to know any matter that you have taken up and it has gone to even judgment, the judgment has been delivered. So we can follow up and document a story.
As I said, these are confidential. So I'm not able to tell you which are the open matters. What I am able to tell you is that we are seeing more matters related to plastic coming. And we see that more are going to come because there is an increase of awareness on that aspect.
So, question, you show us this table, which show the East Africa countries, the status of plastic ban. I can see some of them tax incentives already, some are not, some provide fines, some are not. So my question is, why are countries like Burundi and Tanzania who still don't have tax incentives on plastics? For me, I believe providing tax incentive maybe on plastic substitutes will help in this, of course, in dealing with plastic. Why do you think these countries not yet, or maybe are playing imposing tax incentives or fines?
So this is the question I always ask to our Kenya. I'm based in Kenya, so for me, it's easier to have open conversation in the country more than in others. But this is exactly the question that the bill is trying to address. It doesn't matter why, can we put in place an instrument that is able to give the answer and develop incentive, whether they are tax incentive or other kind of incentive, so that we can support all the other country, but to grow in this industry. And I'm sorry, I think I expressed wrongly. What the SUP bill tried to do is to harmonize the legislation across East Africa so that we don't have gaps and we can facilitate trade, we can facilitate the exchange, the transboundaries and all of that. So this is what the single-use plastic bill trying to answer your question and provide guidelines, very basic guidelines to implement a legislation and guidelines, and then whatever is needed by the country to make it happen at the country level. Is a question that we need to ask, why we don't have incentive, why tax is not used for many other reasons. I think this is the more demand we have for these kind of things, the more we are able to ask the government for that to support the industry.